Chapter 43. Think what it would be like if you got back to your island and... I had all Tuesday to think nothing but that. To see myself as Allison saw me. I drafted a long letter, several letters, to her that evening, but none of them said what I wanted. That I hated what I had done to her, but couldn't do otherwise. I was like one of Ulysses' sailors, turned into a swine, and able now only to be my new self. I tore the pages up. What I really wanted to say was that I was enchanted, and that I had, absurd though it was, to be free to be enchanted. It was a help to teach hard, conscientiously for once, to get through the suspense. On Wednesday evening, when I returned from the last lesson of the day to my room, I found a note on my desk. My heart leaped. I recognized the handwriting at once. The note said, "We look forward to seeing you on Saturday. If I do not hear to the contrary, I shall know that you are coming. Maurice Conchis." It was dated above Wednesday morning. I felt an enormous relief, a surge of renewed excitement, and suddenly everything during that last weekend seemed, if not justified, necessary. I had marking to do, but I couldn't stay in. I walked up to the main ridge, to my natural gazebo. I had to see the roof of Barani, the south of the island, the sea, the mountains, all the reality of the unreality. There was none of the burning need to go down and spy that had possessed me the previous week, but a balancing mixture of expectation and reassurance, a certainty of the health of the symbiosis. I was there still, they were mine. For some extraordinary reason, on the way back to the school, my own happiness made me think of Allison again, almost to pity her ignorance of her real rival. On impulse, before I started on the marking, I scribbled her a note. "Allie, darling, you can't say to someone, 'I've decided I ought to love you.' I can see a million reasons why I ought to love you, because, as I tried to explain in my fashion, my perfect bastard fashion, I do love you. Parnassus was beautiful. Please don't think it was nothing to me, only the body, or could ever be anything but unforgettable, always for me. Let's for God's sake keep that. I know it's over, but a moment or two, beside that pool, however many other lovers we both have, will never be over." It relieved my conscience a little, and I posted it the next morning. The only conscious exaggeration was in the last sentence. At 3:50 on Saturday, I was at the gate of Barani, and there, walking along the track toward me, was Conchis. He had on a black shirt, long khaki shorts, dark brown shoes, and faded green stockings. He was walking purposefully, almost in a hurry, as if he had wanted to be out of the way before I arrived. But he raised his arm as soon as he saw me. We stopped in mid-track, 6 feet apart. "Nicholas, hello." He gave his little head shake. "A pleasant half-term?" "Not particularly." "You went to Athens?" I had already decided on my story there. He might know, through Hermes or Paterescu, that I had been away. "My friend couldn't make it. Her airline had put her on another route." "Ah, I am sorry. A shame." I shrugged, then eyed him. "I spent most of it wondering whether I should come here again. I haven't been hypnotized before." He smiled. He knew what I was really asking. "It is for you to reject or accept what was suggested." I remembered, as I smiled thinly in return, that I was back in a polysemantic world. "I'm grateful for that part of it." There was no other part. He did not take kindly to my skeptical look, and went on with some asperity. "I am a doctor, therefore under the Hippocratic oath. If I ever wished to ask you questions under hypnosis, I should most certainly ask your permission first. Apart from anything else, it is a very unsatisfactory method. It has been demonstrated again and again that patients are quite capable of lying under hypnosis." All those stories about sinister mesmerists forcing a hypnotist can force you to do foolish and incongruous things, but he is powerless against the superego. I can assure you of that. I let a few moments pass. You're going out? I have been riding all day. I must walk, but I hoped to meet you first. Someone is waiting to serve you tea. How do you want me to behave? He glanced back toward the invisible house, then took my arm and made me stroll back beside him toward the gate. Our patient is in mixed spirits. She cannot quite hide her excitement at your return, nor her disappointment that I am in the little secret between you. What little secret is that? He gave me a look under his eyebrows. Investigative hypnosis is a regular part of my treatment of her, Nicholas. With her permission? In this case, her parents. I see. I know she is pretending to be an actress now, and I know why. She wishes to please you. Please me? You accused her of acting, or so I understand, and she has gratefully embraced the accusation. He squeezed my elbow, but I have set her a problem. I have told her I know her new disguise, not through hypnosis, but because you have told me. Then now she won't trust me. She never trusted you. She also revealed under hypnosis that from the first she suspected you to be a doctor, someone working with me. I recalled what she had said about being spun round in blind man's buff, but rightly suspicious. Now that you've told me the truth? He raised a delighted finger. Precisely. It was as if he were congratulating an especially bright pupil, and was blind, as nonsensically blind as one of Lewis Carroll's queens before Alice, to my obvious bewilderment. Therefore your task is now to gain her confidence. By all means, share any suspicion she shows of my motives. Give them credence, but be careful. She may set traps. You must make objections if she becomes too far-fetched. Always remember that one side of her split mentality is quite capable of rational assessment and has a great deal of experience in making fools of doctors whose technique is to humor ad absurdum. I am sure some story of persecution will come. She will try to gain you to her side, against me. Metaphorically, if not literally, I bit my lips. But surely if we all know now that she can't be Lily... That is dropped. I am become an eccentric millionaire. She and her sister are a pair of young actresses I have brought here. She will no doubt invent some outlandish reason for what she will perhaps lead you to believe are very wicked purposes. They may well be of some suspect sexual nature. You will demand evidence, proof. He waved his hand, as if my part in all this was too manifest now to need specifying in detail. What happens if she tries a repeat of last year, tries to make me help her escape? He gave me a briskly warning look. You must tell me at once, but I do not think it is likely. She learnt her lesson with Mitford, and remember, however much she may appear to trust you, she does not. You will, of course, maintain that you never told me a word of what happened on your last visit. I smiled. Of course. I am sure you see where I am driving. I wish to bring the poor child to a realization of her own true problem by forcing her to recognize the nature of the artificial situation we are creating together here. She will make her first valid step back toward normality when one day she stops and says, "This is not the real world. These are not real relationships." What are her chances? Small, but they exist, especially if you play your part well. She may not trust you, but she is attracted to you. I'll do my best. Thank you. I have great confidence in you, Nicholas. He held out his hand. I am delighted to have you back. We parted, but I looked back after a few steps to see which way he had taken. It was apparently down toward Mozza. I did not believe he was going for a constitutional. He walked far too much like a man with someone else to meet, something to arrange. Once again I was shaken. I had come to Barani determined, after so many useless hours of speculation, to be equally doubting of both him and Julie. But I knew I would have to watch her like a hawk now. The old man had been involved in psychiatry. He could hypnotize. Those were proven facts. And nothing she had said about herself had been backed by any hard evidence. There was also the increasingly strong possibility that they were acting in league to gull me, in which case Julie Holmes was no more her real self than Lily Montgomery had been. No one was visible as I approached the house. As I crossed the gravel, I leaped up the steps and walked quietly round the corner onto the wide tiling under the front of the colony. She was standing in one of the arches facing the sea, half in sun, half in shadow, and, it was a shock, though I might have guessed, in contemporary clothes. A navy blue short-sleeved shirt, a pair of white beach trousers with a red belt. She was barefooted, her long hair down, a girl who might have adorned the terrace of any smart Mediterranean hotel. One thing was decided at once. She was as desirable in modern dress as in costume, an arrestingly beautiful young woman, in no way less attractive for being less artificial now. She turned as I appeared, and there was a strange silence, a doubt in both our looks across the space between us. She seemed fairly surprised, as if she had half decided I would not come, was relieved, yet almost at once distancing. There was a tiny air about her of having been caught out of costume, and not being sure of my reaction to this new appearance, like a woman showing a new dress for the first time to the man who has to pay for it. She looked down from my eyes. On my side I knew the ghost of Allison, of what had happened on Parnassus, a flicker of adultery, a moment's guilt. We remained like that for several seconds. Then she looked up again to where I stood 20 feet away with the duffel bag in my hand. I noticed something else new about her. The beginning of a tan, honeyed skin now. I tried to read her psychologically, psychiatrically, and gave up. I said, "They suit you, modern clothes." Still, she seemed at a loss, as if the days apart had given her countless second thoughts. "Did you meet him?" "Meet who?" But that was a mistake. There was something impatient in her stare. "The old man?" "Yes. He was just going for a walk." Her suspicion was not assuaged, and she stared at me a moment more. Then she said, with a perceptible indifference, "Do you want some tea? That'd be nice." She moved in barefooted silence across the tiles to the table. I saw a pair of red espadrilles by the music-room doors. I watched her strike a match and light the spirit lamp, then set the kettle on its stand. She avoided my eyes, fiddling with the muslin covers over the food, the scar on her wrist. There was almost a sullenness about her. I dropped my bag by the wall and went closer. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." "I haven't betrayed you in any way." "Whatever he may have said." She gave me the briefest glance, but then stared down at the table again. I tried small talk. "Where have you been?" "On the yacht." "Where?" "Cruising. In the Cyclades." "I've missed you." She said nothing. She would not look at me. I had anticipated various kinds of reception, but not this apparent wishing that I hadn't come at all. There stole through me a little chill of fear. Something fraught about her, lost. And with a girl as pretty as this, only the reason I did not want to believe could account for the apparent lack of other men in her life. "I gather Lily's dead." She spoke to the table. "You don't seem very surprised." "Nothing surprises me here, any more." She drew a breath. I had made another wrong answer. "So what are you officially playing now?" She sat down. The kettle must have been boiled once already, because it began to hiss. Suddenly she looked up at me. The question was transparently accusing. "Did you enjoy Athens?" No, and I didn't mean my friend. Maurice told us you had. I silently cursed him and had a touch of liar's nightmare. That's odd. He didn't know 5 minutes ago, since he asked me himself if I'd met her. She looked down. Why didn't you? For the reasons I told you. It's all over. She tipped a little hot water into the teapot, then crossed the colonnade to empty it over the edge. As she came back, I said, and because I knew I was going to see you again. She sat and spooned some tea from a caddy into the pot. Start eating if you're hungry. I'm much more hungry to know why we're behaving like total strangers. Because that's precisely what we are. Why won't you answer my questions about your new role? Because you already know the answer. Her gray hyacinth eyes were on me, and they were very direct. The kettle boiled, and she lifted it and filled the pot. As she put it back on its stand and turned out the flame beneath, she said, I wouldn't really blame you for thinking I was mad. I begin to wonder increasingly myself if I'm not. Her voice grew drier still. Sorry if I've spoilt a prepared scene. Then she smiled up without humor. Do you want this foul goat's milk or lemon? Lemon. I felt a great relief then. She had just done the one thing she would never do. If the old man had been telling me the truth, unless she was so insanely cunning, or cunningly insane, that she was beating him at his own game. I remembered Occam's razor, always believe the simplest of several explanations. But I played safe. Why should I think you're mad? Why should I think you're not what you say you are? Why indeed? Because the question you've just asked proves you aren't. She pushed a cup toward me. Your tea. I stared at it, then up at her. Okay, I don't believe you're a famous case of schizophrenia. She eyed me, still unwon. Will you not partake of a sandwich, Mr. Orff? I did not smile, and I left a silence. Julie, this is absurd. We're falling into every trap he sets. I thought we agreed last time. We don't have to lie to each other out of his hearing. Without warning, she stood and walked slowly to the far end of the colonnade, where steps led down to the vegetable terrace to the west. She leaned against the wall of the house, her back to me, staring out toward the distant mountains of the Peloponnesus. After a moment, I stood and went behind her. She did not turn to look at me. I'm not blaming you. If he's told you as many lies about me as he has about you. I reached and touched her shoulder. Come on. We did establish some sort of trust last time. There was no response to my hand, and I let it drop. I suppose you want to kiss me again. The naive abruptness of that took me by surprise. Is that a crime? Suddenly she folded her arms, turned her back to the wall, faced me with an intense look. And get me into bed? Only if you wanted. She explored my eyes, then looked down. And if I don't? Then obviously. So perhaps it's not worth your going on. That's bloody insulting. I said it with enough force to check her. She bowed her head, her arms still folded. I spoke in a gentler voice. Look, what the hell's he been telling you? There was a long silence. Then she murmured, If only I knew what to believe. Try your instincts. I seem to have mislaid them since I came here. There was another silence. Then she made a little sideways movement of her bent head. Her voice was a shade less accusing. He said something foul after last time, that you went to brothels, and that Greek brothels weren't safe, and that I mustn't let you kiss me again. Is that where you think I've been? I don't know where you've just been. So you believe him? She said nothing. I felt furious with conscience. The damned gall he had, talking about the Hippocratic Oath. I stared at the bent head, then spoke. I've had enough of this. I'm clearing out. I didn't really mean it. But I turned back toward the table as if I did. She said quickly, "Please." A tiny pause. I didn't say I believed it. I stopped and looked back at her. At last there was something less hostile in her eyes. "But you're behaving as if you did." "I'm behaving as I am because I don't understand why he keeps telling me things he knows I can't believe. If it was true, he ought to have warned you at the beginning. That did occur to us. Didn't you ask him why not?" "He said he'd only just found out." Then she said in her gentlest voice yet, "Please, don't go away." Though she looked down in the end, she held my eyes long enough for me to believe the request was sincere. I went back in front of her. "Are we still so convinced of his essential goodness?" "In a kind of way, yes," she added. "In spite of everything." I had the universal telepathy experience. "Yes, he told us." "He has hypnotized you?" "Yes, several times. He claims that's how he knows everything that's going on in your mind." That shocked her momentarily. She looked up, but then she gave a little puff of protest. "It's ridiculous. I'd never let him do it." "June's always been there. He insists on that himself. It's just a technique, actually rather a marvelous one, for helping you get into a part. She says he just talks and talks, and somehow I absorb it all." "Is Julie just another part?" "I'll show you my passport. I haven't got it with me, but next time, I promise." "That last time, you might have warned me the schizophrenia thing was coming." "I did warn you something was coming, as much as I dared." I could feel our doubts and suspicions mounting once more, and I had to concede that, yes, she had warned me in her fashion. There was something much more submissive about her now, in the defensive. "All right, but whatever he isn't, he is a psychiatrist?" "We've known that for some time." "So the whole thing here is along those lines?" Again I was assessed. Then she looked sideways down at the tiles. "He talks a lot about experimental situations, about the behavior patterns of people faced with situations they don't understand. A lot about schizophrenia." She shrugged. "How people split themselves. Ethically, all sorts of ways, before the unknown. One day he said something about the unknown being the greatest motivating favor. One day he said something about the unknown being the great motivating factor in all human existence. He meant not knowing why we're here, why we exist, death, the afterlife, all that. But what does he actually want us to prove for him?" She still looked at the ground, now shook her head. "Honestly, we've tried and tried to pin him down, but he always comes up with the same argument. If we know the final purpose, what he expects, then obviously it will affect how we behave." She let out a reluctant breath. "It does have a sort of logic." "I've had that line. When I ask to know your supposed case history." Her eyes met mine. "It does exist. I've had to learn it by heart, what he's invented. One thing's clear. For some reason he's feeding us every lie under the sun, but we don't have to be what he wants us to imagine. I'm no more a syphilitic than you're a schizophrenic." She bowed her head. "I really didn't believe it. I mean, if it's a part of his game, experiment, whatever it is, I don't care a damn how many lies he tells you about me, but I do care if you start believing them." There was a silence. Her eyes, it seemed almost against her will, rose to meet mine again. They said something beyond the present situation, in a much older language than that of words. A doubt dissolved in them, a candor was restored, and they tacitly accepted my judgment. For a fleeting moment there was the tiniest conceding curl, a wry admission at the corners of her mouth. She lowered her eyes again, and then her hands slipped behind her back. Silence. A hint of little girl's penitence, a timid waiting to be forgiven. This time it was a shared thing. The lips were warm and they moved under mine, and I was allowed to hold her body close, to know its curves, its slenderness, and also to know, with a delicious certainty, that all was much less complicated than it seemed. She wanted to be kissed. The tips of our tongues touched. For a few seconds the embrace became tight, passionate, but then she abruptly pulled her mouth away and turned her head against my shoulder. Though she stayed close against my body, I kissed the crown of her hair. "I've nearly gone mad thinking about you," she whispered. "I'd have died if you hadn't come today. This is real, whatever else is unreal. That's what frightens me." "Why?" "Wanting to be sure, but not being sure." I tightened my arms a little round her. "Can't we meet tonight, alone somewhere?" She was silent, and I said quickly, "For God's sake, trust me. I'd never hurt you." She detached herself gently, took my hands, still looked down. "It's not that. Just that there are more people about than you imagine." "Where do you sleep here?" "There's a sort of hiding place," she said quickly. "I will show you, I promise." "Is there something planned for tonight?" "He's telling us another supposed episode from his life. I'm going to join you after dinner." She smiled up. "And I honestly don't know what it is." "Then we could meet after that?" "I'll try, but I can't." "How about midnight? By the statue?" "If I possibly can." She glanced back toward the table and pressed my hands. "Now your tea's cold." We went back to the table and sat. I stopped her making any fresh tea and we drank it tepid. I ate a sandwich or two. She smoked and we talked. Like myself, neither she nor her sister could understand the old man's paradoxical determination to lure us into his game, yet seeming preparedness to abandon it. Every time we show qualms, he offers to fly us straight back to England. One evening on the cruise, we went at him. What was he doing? Couldn't he please all the rest? In the end, he was as near being upset as I've seen. We almost had to plead with him the next morning, ask his forgiveness for being so nosy. He's obviously using the same technique on all of us. He keeps saying I must keep you at arm's length, runs you down. She flicked ash on the tiles and smiled. He even apologized for your being so slow-witted the other day. I thought that was rather rich, considering you'd seen through the Lily thing in the first 5 seconds. He hasn't tried to sell you the idea that I'm some kind of assistant, a young psychiatrist? I could see that both surprised and unsettled her. She hesitated. No, but it had crossed our minds. Then she added, Are you? I grinned. He told me just now that he'd extracted it from you under hypnosis, that it's what you suspect. We must watch it, Julie. He wants us on a quicksand. She put out her cigarette. And also to realize we are? The last thing he can really want is to drive us apart. Yes, that's what we feel. So the enigma is why? She gave a little nod of the head. And also why you have any remaining doubts about me. No more than you must feel about me. But you said it last time. We ought to behave as if we'd met naturally away from here. The more we know about each other, the safer we are, the surer. I gave her a small smile. So far as I'm concerned, the most incredible thing about you is that you got away from Cambridge unmarried. She looked down. I very nearly didn't. But past now? Yes, very past. There are so many things I want to know about the real you. The real me's a lot less exciting than the imaginary one. Where do you live at home? Real home's Dorset. My mother. My father's dead. What was he? But I never got an answer. She gave a lightning, shocked look behind me. I twisted round. It was Conchis. He must have crept up on us. I hadn't heard a sound. In his hands he held poised a 4-foot axe, exactly as if he were in two minds about raising and sinking it in my skull. I heard Julie's sharp voice. "Maurice, that's not funny." He ignored her, staring at me. "Have you had your tea?" "Yes." "I have found a dead pine. I wish it chopped up." His voice was ludicrously abrupt and peremptory. I threw a glance back at Julie. She was on her feet and staring furiously at the old man. I knew at once that something was very wrong. It was as if I was no longer there. Conchi said with a bizarrely grim irrelevance, "Maria needs wood for her stove." Julie's voice was scalding, very nearly hysterical. "You gave me a shock. How could you do that?" I jerked another look back at her. Her eyes were dilated, as if mesmerized by Conchi's. She almost spat her next words at him. "I hate you." "My dear, you are overexcited. Go and rest." "No, I insist. I hate you." It was said with a mixture of venom and despair that sent all my newly acquired confidence in her crashing to the ground. I looked in a panic from one face to the other, trying to see some sign of collusion. Conchis lowered the axe. "I insist, Julie." There was a brief battle of wills over my head. Then abruptly she turned and kicked into the espadrilles by the doors of the music room. As she came back past the table, through all this she had not given me one look. Apparently to go away from the house, she suddenly snatched up the cup of tea in front of me and dashed it in my face. There was hardly any liquid left, and it was nearly cold, but the gesture had a terrible infantile spitefulness. It took me totally by surprise. She had moved on at once. Conchi spoke sharply. "Julie!" She stopped at the eastern edge of the colonnade, but kept a resentful back turned to us. "You were behaving like a spoilt child. That was unforgivable." She did not move. He took a few steps toward her and spoke in a lower voice, but I heard his words. "Actresses may show temperament, but not to innocent bystanders. Now go and apologize to our guest." She wavered, then swiveled round and marched back past him to where I sat. Her cheeks were faintly flushed, and her eyes still avoided mine. She stopped in front of me, but stared mutinously at the ground. I searched her face, her downcast eyes, then in desperation looked past her at Conchi's. "You did give us a shock." Unseen by her, he raised a pacifying hand for my benefit, then addressed her back. "We await your apology, Julie." Suddenly her eyes were on mine. "I hate you, too." The voice was petulant, exactly that of a spoilt child, but miraculously, or so it seemed to me, her right eyelid fluttered. I was not to believe a word of all this little scene. I had difficulty in keeping a straight face. Meanwhile, she had turned and was walking past the old man again. He reached out a detaining hand, but she brushed it angrily aside and ran down the steps and then across the gravel. After some 20 yards, she stopped running and her hands rose to her face, as if in self-dismay, as she went on at a fast walk. Conchis turned back to me and smiled at the face of concern I had managed to assume. "You must not take that tantrum too seriously. A part of her is always on the brink of acutely regressive behavior. She was pretending a little. She could have fooled me. That was her hope, to demonstrate what a tyrant I am. And a scandal-monger, or so it seems." He eyed me. I said, "I don't mind a drop of tea in my face, but I draw the line at being given syphilis, especially when you know the facts about that." He smiled. "But you have surely guessed why." "Not yet." "I also told her you had met your friend last week. Perhaps that is a clue?" He must have seen by my face that it wasn't. He hesitated, then offered me the axe to carry. "Come, I will explain." I stood and took the axe, and we set off back toward the gate. There must arrive a time this summer when all this is ended. I must therefore provide for, how shall I put it, exits that will not cause Julie too much pain. This false information I provide about you offers two such exits. She knows there is someone else in your life, that perhaps you are not such a desirable young man as you seem at first sight. In addition, schizophrenics, as you have just seen, are emotionally unstable. I know I can trust you not to take sexual advantage of a very sick girl, but it will help relieve the situation for you if there are additional obstacles implanted in her mind. I felt a purr inside me. That one shadow of a wink had made all his deceptions hollow and tolerable. It also allowed me to deceive in return. On that level, of course, I understand. That is why I interrupted your tete-a-tete. She needs little setbacks, problems to overcome, as people with broken limbs need exercise. He said, "And how did you find her, Nicholas?" "Very suspicious of me, as you said." "But you managed?" "I was beginning to." "Good. Tomorrow I am going to disappear, or at least I shall lead her to believe that. You will have all day with her in apparent solitude. We will see what she makes of it. I'm delighted you trust me so much." He touched my arm. "I confess also that I did wish to provoke a somewhat excessive reaction in her, for your benefit, in case you had any remaining doubts about her abnormality." "I have none now, whatever." He inclined his head, and I grinned in my mind. We came to the tree, which was already on its side. He wanted it hacked into manageable lengths. Hermes would carry the wood to the house. I had only to pile it in readiness. He went off as soon as I started swinging the axe. I enjoyed the work much better than the previous time. The smaller stems were so dry and brittle that they broke at one stroke, and I felt each stroke was symbolic. Something more than wood was being hewn into manageable lengths. As I neatly stacked the branches, I felt I was also beginning to neatly stack the mystery of Bharani and Conchis. I was going to discover all about Julie, and I had already discovered the essential thing, that she was on my side. In some way, he was using us as personifications of his irony, as his partners in exploring ambivalence. Every truth in his world was a sort of lie, and every lie a sort of truth. Like Julie, I began, despite the traps and tricks and their seeming malice, to accept his fundamental benevolence. I remembered that smiling stone head he had shown me, his ultimate truth. He was, in any case, far too intelligent to expect us not to see through the surface aspect of his masks. Secretly, he must want us to. And as for whatever deeper purpose, inner meaning they had, I was content to wait now. Swinging the axe in the afternoon sun, enjoying the physical exercise, feeling in command again, thinking of midnight, tomorrow, Julie, the kiss, Allison forgotten, I was content to wait all summer if he wanted, and for the summer itself to wait all time.